So, hi, Aaron. In case you're not able to join us, we hope you'll be here soon. But if you're not, we're recording this for you. We just went over a welcome and our community agreements, and we're going to go ahead and get into the conversation. So, we would love to hear from both of you, maybe what has been showing up in your leadership. I was thinking about this earlier today. I think the unsung hero of Evolve Summit that is doing a lot of work is the time. That we started this in January, and it would have been really different had we done 2 days and delivered all this content with you. But the time and the space in between and this happening over the course of 3 months, I think is really maybe just as valuable as the content or just as valuable as the coaching because you get to apply and process and think and apply again and try and do it a different way and watch your colleagues or see a role model do it for you. And so, as Brian mentioned, we want to begin with your leadership experiences, which I think we often think in terms of challenges, and that is fine. But it might be an aha moment, or let me tell you about this thing that just went beautifully. We can learn from those as well. And so, just love to begin with any leadership experiences that are feeling relevant to you, particularly around this focus around executive leadership. And then we all will connect it as it makes sense to the content as we go. I see you're both are eager to go first.
I'm trying to be more intentional because I love to talk. So trying to like take a pause.
I love your
Um,
intentionality to go first today.
but I'm happy to jump in. I feel like I've barely had space to breathe, and February has just disappeared from under me. I was telling Don that I felt really guilty that I fell off the wagon, and I haven't been able to, like, since our last maybe emergent or praxis session, I
Mhm,
haven't really been able to catch up on all the materials, and
mhm,
she uh, made me feel good to say it's okay. You'll
yeah,
get to it when you get to it,
yeah,
which was really helpful. Um, I have a couple of like multi-pronged themes happening
mhm,
in my leadership.
mhm,
Um, for one, I'm much calmer as a leader than I've ever been, and I can see tangible differences in how much that affects the people around me to feel calmer. Um, I have really been working very hard. Don and I have developed some tools for me to just not give my empathy as easily as I have in the past
mhm,
and feel quite so exhausted. We spoke about the spoon theory, which is so famous for, the world of ability and people with disabilities. And we decided to sort of use that framework to be like, how many spoons do you have in a day?
mhm,
And how many are you giving? And I really love that. That has been helpful. Um, I she, Don asked me a really great question of how much thinking time do you need in a day? And I was like 2 hours. And blocking those 2 hours has been impossible on my calendar.
mhm,
It seems like everybody has something that they're just like, we really just need to talk to Gauri. And I'm just like, okay. So, oh, the last 3 weeks or so, I've been working weekends, evenings. I'm not happy about it.
mhm,
I feel not prepared, and preparation for me is key to like being in space as a calm, collected leader. And I'm trying really hard to sort of build those boundaries. So I'm really enjoying the way in which my complicated bias and discrimination cases are being handled. I've got two really complicated faculty connected cases where I noticed the why don't you be the one who mentors them and tells them and blah blah blah, where I'm
mhm,
just like, I am here to assess, here's my assessment.
mhm.
And you are welcome to do with it what you wish. Don helped me sort of think through that as well, and I was very grateful for it because I felt that, but I felt like in the past I was just like, fine, you all don't want to help these people, I'll do it. And
Yeah.
then I just filled my plate up so much. that it resulted in some resentment on why don't y'all feel the important need to do it. And it was very obvious to me they definitely wanted it done. They just didn't want to be the bearers of bad news. And I'm like, well, you're the supervisors. So do what you need to do to
Mhm.
supervise.
Mhm.
The vice president of culture and connection is not going to tell a faculty member what they should teach in a class. You asked me to give you an assessment. I give you an assessment that this is not in line with our mission and how we would like our students to graduate. Had a really complex case of a student and their parents who turned up in my office because of how a faculty behaved, which would have risen to Title VI. And I'm very proud of the fact that I talked them off the ledge, made them feel heard, and also did not have this like, you should fire this faculty member piece, like, that typically comes up. So in that, it's all great. A couple things I'm noticing is I'm working on an institutional research, like a campus climate project, where the IR director keeps telling me that he does not have the time to crunch the data and won't do it. He's delayed my project by over a year now. And the provost who he reports to also similarly gives him the, do what you need to, but I need you to work on this. So she's giving him the okay to delay my
Mhm.
project, which is frustrating me. And I've been very, like, initially in last semester, I lost my temper on him. And this semester, I just keep smiling and going, I think it's all about what you choose to prioritize. But I also realize I'm just going to have to pick this up. At one point, he sent me an email saying, my boss would be appalled if she knew I was doing this. And I said, then I'm happy to talk to your boss. And you should not have promised this a year ago. Now to tell me this 2 months before the project is due results in delays. And therefore, because you refused to train my student worker that I offered, because you said you will create the slides, you are needing to like do this. So I know that I'm gonna have to pick up a bulk of it, and it frustrates me I can tell I don't hold the power in this one, but I'm also trying not to have my angry self appear because I don't want him to know that he's like getting to me.
Mhm.
It's a really um, interesting phenomenon because in the past I have lost my temper and I've realized that it only devalues my position on campus
Mhm.
in a way that I cannot let it devalue.
Mhm.
So angry as I am, I'm really not showing the anger. I am just holding the line and knowing that I have to do this work because it connects to my own compensation. And therefore, at the end of the day, if that means burning some midnight oil, I will. My team received some really great feedback. We have a really huge population of international students for a school our size, 20% from 60 plus countries, with pretty abysmal retention rates before I took over. And I really highlighted some cracks and gaps when I came in to sort of say, we're going to formatively just rework this. But I worked with my team to really understand what the front line looked like, to have them make a decision on which programming to continue, what initiatives to continue. And I know that the president and the cabinet knew about this, but when the fall to spring retention for international students increased 11 percentage points, that was such a big win for my state, for my team. And I really gave them kudos to say, this is your work. This is your work. Like all of those days when you sit and work through their visa questions, their acculturation pieces. So my team just feels validated and seen. I feel validated and seen in the cabinet and the board spaces. And sort of it feels very good to see that things we put into motion are actually showing the ROI that the business folks really care about,
Mhm.
which is the retention numbers. Um, and I have an administrative assistant who is relatively new. She started in September. She's a great human being who is just a leaky, like over communicator and like is one of those people who creates a very codependent relationships. And
Mhm.
I picked up on that very fast. And she spoke to me yesterday, and she's having some personal things where she just like, I need 2 weeks off. And there were some things she wished for that I was just like, no. I mean, I was like, congratulations, I'm so happy. However, no, you are
Mhm.
not going to be gone for 2 weeks and get married and work from home because I'm just like, how? you're not going to be able to work from home, right? But I also was empathetic because I said, burn all of your PTO and I will allow for a couple days in that time for you to work from home because I don't want her to have to work, pay without leave without pay. But I gave her very clear instructions. While you're gone, talk to the student worker, move this along, make sure that your communication, know who's people to contact, let the team know. And I was very happy because in the past, I would have just been like, great, I just have to do this work by myself. But I was like, you know what? I gave her a really clear plan on how to hand this off and how to not have to step in and do the work. So in many ways, I'm happy in the direction that I'm going in. But instances like that HR director or, facilities just saying, nah, we won't do this for you when they would do it for other offices, those are still points that I'm trying to come to terms with and trying to figure out how I can make it better for
Mhm.
my experience.
I was worried we
Yeah.
weren't going to have anything to talk about.
I just want to jump in and say that I am really uh, I don't know if I just want to mark your all of the things that you're keeping track of in terms of how you've been able to show up as more calm and then more confident in some of your decision making, right? Is really showing through,
Mhm.
and I think that those two cases, right, that you're talking about, right, are seem to be just challenges that you're continuing to stick with, right? Um, Exploration wise, right, in terms of some of the things that you'd like to hear more about from not only your cohort mate Trisha and us, is it around Goni? Is it around the being centered and calm piece, or is it around navigating leadership presence? What would you say, are the pieces that you'd like us to engage with?
I think the centered and calm I have made a great progress on. The navigating leadership presence, I think that's a piece that the centered and calm connects to.
Yeah.
But I would love to get your feedback from all of you and thoughts from all of you.
Well, I'll jump on that because I was picking up on that too. And I think you may have heard it in the videos, but I'll be really explicit about it here, which is one of the things that probably the most common thing I talk about with the leaders that I coach is if you're waiting for the world around you to get organized to bring you calm, peace, and joy, you're fucked. Great leaders find that calm, peace, and joy within, and then bring that to the super complicated, chaotic, adversarial world around them. And I think that's why we start with personal foundations so you can get grounded in your purpose, rooted in your values, centered in your self-awareness and self-management. And if you can stay there, then an uncooperative director of assessment is just another thing to practice. And some supervisor who wants you to take on their responsibility around a bias incident is just another opportunity to practice. And losing our temper is just a reminder that we have more practice to do. It's not failure. It's not that you're done. It's not that you're terrible. It's not that you're not good at this. Like, lost my temper. Don't want to do that. How can I do that again? And coming back to those centering things. And I think for all of us, it's different. It might be yoga. It might be meditation. It might be our values. It might be our life purpose. It might be, you know, um, we say that evolve is not prescriptive, but we want to help you find that. And so wherever you're finding that. And I think that calmness, how do you become the eye at the center of the storm so you navigate through that is really helpful. And I heard some boundaries around calendar, around saying no. Um, and one of my favorite folks around boundaries is Dr. Becky Kennedy, who's a parenting specialist. And one of the things she says is boundaries are not what other people can and can't do. It's what you're going to do when people do these things. So boundaries is not telling anyone else, don't call me after 5. It's if you call me after 5, I won't answer. That's a boundary. She talks about her kid pushing all of the buttons on the New York apartment building. And it's not, don't touch the buttons. That's not a boundary. That is, if you touch more than our floor, you won't have an iPad for the rest of the day. You get to pick. And always giving those. And I heard some things where, I can do that, but that's going to mean this, and that's going to mean this, that's going to mean this. Um, a thing that we touched on at the very beginning, and we'll touch on in the final unit too, is this process of becoming where we go from knowing something to doing something to being something. And I'm hearing that. I know how important being calm is. I'm practicing doing it, sometimes better than others. And after a lot of practice, it starts to be who you are, and you just show up calm without the effort, without the intentionality, without the remembering the module, or remembering, but that takes time. And I think knowing it and not always doing it is a great place to be. Doing it over and over and over again and noticing that sometimes it's integrated into who you are and sometimes not is a great place to be. And we're just trying to move through on that. And I think as both of you are going through Evolve, notice there are some things that we're talking about that you already know, but you're not doing it. So focus there. Don't focus on I already knew it, focus on doing it. And there's some things you've been doing for a decade, but you got to remember, you got to think about it, you got to be conscious about it. Well, how do you move that into the being where it's unconscious competence, where it's just who you are and how it shows up? And I think you had a number um, of beautiful examples. I'll pause there because I think I want to hear from some other folks, but I'll just tag that the over empathy might be a thing we can come back to.
Gauri, I have a question. I wrote down one thing you said because I was like, ooh, that's so me too. And then I started questioning it. So you said, I don't want him to know, this wasn't exact, but I don't want him, the IR guy, to know that he's angering me. That generally, that's was the sentence. And I was wondering if in my head, I was like, yes, that's executive presence, right? Like it's control. But then I started thinking, but for me, it still eats me on the inside that I am angry, like that I gave it any energy at all. And the balance between like recognizing and bypassing versus just not letting it out. I'm just wondering if you, I don't know, how that hits you. Do you want to talk more about that? How does that sit with you?
Um, he knows that I am not happy with how he's approaching this. So, um, what I don't want him, um, my intention is for him to not think that he can make the decisions on how this project is going to move forward, which is exactly what he's been doing from day one in the shifting. Like there's flexibility, which I have shown a great deal of. And then there is, I'm just not going to do it. What are you going to do?
Mhm.
Right. Which is what basically he's been doing. And he said that, Gauri, if I don't get to it, I don't get to it. It doesn't matter. I have these things that, the provost wants me to work on, and those take priority. This is outside of my normal job description. Like all of those things, all of those needed to be discussed at the start. Um, and that's the key piece that I brought to him, right? So I've done a lot of things with him. I've asked him for external vendors. I've asked him to train my student worker to be able to do this because she's a data analytics major. I've
Hmm.
asked him all of those things he has chosen not to do. I don't have time to train her. I don't know who external vendors are. So he wants to hold control because it's an IR piece, but he also doesn't want to do it because he's like, if you just wait over the summer, heads will give you the data and then I don't have to do it. Well, if you wanted to discuss that, then when we decided a yearly cycle, you should have said that we can't do it. And he was not very clear about that when we had a discussion. So he does know that I am unhappy with how he's approaching it, which is why when he tried to make me feel grateful by being like, my boss would be appalled I'm doing this, I said, then let me talk to her. And you should be clear that IR does not offer these services, right? And I was like, and also you chose not to train my student worker. And he's like, I just don't have the time. And I'm like, but you would have made your life easier, right?
Mhm.
So he knows that it's annoying, but I also don't want him to feel as though he gets to make the decision of how this moves forward. I also know that he's going to do the bare minimum, and that means that I'm going to be the one. And I also know that when we present and he's there, I'm going to wax eloquent about how amazing he is, because that is precisely what needs to be done,
Mhm.
so that there aren't cracks in leadership that are visible. All of that in the past me would have made me spiral and made me a lot angrier than I am right now.
Mhm.
But right now, I'm just going, I am doing what is right for me, and I am not sorry. Like in the past, I would feel very like, how dare he treat me? And I'm just going, I don't know what his realities are, and I'm empathetic,
Mhm.
but my wishes of how projects are done that are under me and as part of my annual goals that I report to my supervisor and the board do are important for me, and empathy can only go so far. So I don't know if that's the answer to your question. I do feel angry. I process it with my spouse. I process it with myself. I process
Mhm.
it with my inner guide.
Mhm.
There are many, many places and spaces where I process it. But to him, I smile and I'm just like, you do realize this is your choice, right? Okay. And then we move on.
That's beautiful. And I really appreciate you sharing it. And I definitely wasn't looking for a particular answer, but the way that you describe your process, um, it's enlightening. And I really appreciate you sharing that. And it sounds really healthy.
It's not perfect, but I've also come to deal with the fact that there's no such thing as perfect, and that has been a sharp learning curve for me, I can tell you that. I always want to do the 110%. I always want to be the zenith in perfection. And I realized that that perfection drive was more about people thinking I'm great than me thinking I'm great.
Yeah.
And when I was like, I did what I feel is right in the situation, I'm just gonna let it go now. It's still hard some days.
Yeah.
I just want to acknowledge that there might be some gender and other identities about who gets to be angry and who doesn't get to be angry and how that gets to manifest both externally on us and also internally within us, right? I think there's a big difference for leaders between being angry and letting that be reactive for us and noticing that we're angry and choosing to express that. Right? One is I got angry in the meeting, I lost my temper, I said and did things that I regret. Right? Another is I'm angry. I'm making a choice from that grounded, centered place. I'm going to express this time because it's important that people understand that I'm angry and why. And I'm going to express it and communicate it in this way. Um, I think that difference between reactivity, where it's sort of running us, and you sort of watch yourself say and do things, and you're like, what's going on? Um, and choosing a response and saying, no, I'm going to let it go just this much. I'm going to amplify this much because it's important they understand the implications. That difference between reactivity and choosing a response is, I think, a really important line. I think about it all the time as a parent. My kids piss me off. There's a difference between me lashing out at them reactively and me letting them know you've really hurt my feelings and disappointed me, which is a very important thing for them to learn and understand that, dad's not a robot. You have impact on other people. What are others connecting with here?
I'm curious, Trisha, how you connected with that because you did mention um, interest in talking more about it. So what's coming up for you in this?
Yeah, the calmness, Gauri, that you spoke about definitely feels really present for me as well. And a thing happened last evening. It was my birthday, right? So I was like, well, I'm going to do something I want to do. So I did text my family and invite them to come with me. And I was like, I'd like to see this movie. Does anyone else want to go? They didn't, none of them wanted to see this movie, but they were like, it's her birthday. We will go. So we went to see the movie. And um, when I got home, I even left my computer at work. I never leave my computer at work. Never. I was like, I don't know. Someone might need something I can only get to on my computer. But I left it. I was like, look at me, leaving my computer at work.
I'm doing
And
my birthday thing.
exactly, boundaries. Yeah, no. So I checked my phone when we got out of the movie, we got back to the house. And I had, um, so our executive team is the VP and the three associate vice presidents. And we had been doing some budget things. And I sent an email in the afternoon. My VP was out sick yesterday. Um, and I just said, hey, I noticed on our planning sheet, we listed this amount, but on the website, it looks like it's this amount. I'm not sure if we get a discount. Um, and we said we're going to send two people. We've got to do that by June. So just want to keep it on the radar that we probably want to talk about selecting people. That's how it sounded in my head. Emails don't have sound, but I was like, charitable question, pointing this out so we can all be on the same page. And my sick VP had replied while I was at the movie. And I came back to the movie and I was like, I got popcorn vibes. I'm feeling really good. It was a fun movie. And I looked at it and it just went, oh, like the emotion, like literally just like completely deflated my balloon.
Mm.
And I don't, it could just be a sick person trying not to fall behind on email and being like, bleh, like we get a
Mhm.
discount and I already selected two people. I was, but what I heard or what my body did when I read it, so I think is all trauma,
Mm.
was like I didn't reply. I didn't um, you know, loudly exhale even. I was just like, okay, why is my body literally physically feeling this way? It's a email. It's an email. It's not even an important email. Um, yeah, so I still haven't done anything. I just like let it sit there, like, okay, there's my answer. Moving on to the next thing. But it just was a reminder, Dawn, to your question of like, I've been doing really well also, Gauri, on the calm part. Like, I feel like I'm showing up differently for my staff in ways that have been really productive and my colleagues and up and out. And then this moment was like, oh, you know, that practice keeps telling me like
Mhm.
it's practice. You're not going to get it right all the time, but it's just very physically present in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah, that process, I think you beautifully illustrated what Keith was encouraging us, right? Is to be mindful of the way that the emotions are coming up and the temptation to be reactive, right? Versus, seeing what's there and then choosing, how to deal with it. I think that there's a false notion that executive presence, which I don't use that term, by the way, is about having full control of the way one shows up, right? And I, it's a very, I think, dangerous notion for people who, for example, don't get to express anger in particular ways. Keith was reminding us about the gender piece. And then also it is like this immediate self-disciplining of how we think we need to show up as an executive leader. So I challenge that frequently because it disproportionately impacts women and folks of color, queer, trans folks as well, right? Folks who don't fit in that kind of normative expression of self. Um, and so a lot of it comes around this like being calm versus being angry, you know. And even what feels like small things like emails, that you talked about, Trisha, right? We don't, I think, allow ourselves to have that space to feel the emotion and be reactive to emails, and then allow ourselves to kind of work through those emotions and then get to a place where, we choose not to do X, Y, and Z. Um, so yeah, I think what you just shared beautifully illustrates some of what I'm trying to connect the dots of what Keith encouraged us to think about, and also encouraging us to think that to challenge ourselves about what our notions of executive presence might be for us.
If I can add, Trisha, I'd love to understand why why that response felt so particularly personally, like why it evoked the physical response in you as it did. I don't want to approach it from my lens, and I'm happy to share later on what those kind of physical responses are for me and what usually is being evoked when I have those. But I'd love to understand for you, what did it evoke? That what emotions did it evoke to have led to that response?
Yeah, that's a good and fair question. I appreciate it. I think, no, I don't think I know. Um, I don't have what is it, preponderance of evidence and conduct? I don't have a preponderance of positive relationship with my supervisor. I think the way that she has treated me is um, unkind and disrespectful. And this isn't like all day, every day, but there have been 8 years, and particularly for like the last two, there's been an escalation, and even others outside of me have approached me and said, "Wow, I can't believe she did X to you in front of us," where I didn't even, um, I don't know, I'd stay kind of charitable, like, I'm probably on a bad day, you know, just shit happens. Um, but it's gotten to be so much that I think what happened was, what was the phrase we used earlier? Like, oh, here we go again. It's that, like, you don't respect me. Um, and even though Keith and I last week talked about some strategies for leading up and what that would look like and how that would maybe shift some of these dynamics. And so I have been working on that. And, and this is still very present. Like it just felt like an FU from her. Like, I've got this. You don't need to be asking questions that aren't in your lane. I'm exaggerating for effect here. She wouldn't say that to my face. Um, but that's kind of what my body did, was like more evidence of distrust and disrespect and a stay in your own lane kind of vibe rather than um, thank you for contributing to Team One and helping us stay on track.
Thank you for sharing that. Are y'all okay if I just jump in to I'm gonna do a very neurodivergent thing and share a story for a story, okay? Uh 2025 felt like that with my boss, who I actually really like. And I am fascinated by her leadership. I wouldn't approach being a president of the college the way she does, but I respect her for the way that she does it with the restrictions that she has. But there were actual instances where she said one thing behind a closed door and said something else in front of cabinet, promised me one thing, and then something else happened. And there was a huge period of time where it was like, I was just like, no, I'm not backing down on this, to the point that at a board meeting that happened in December or October, a board member pulled me aside and said, I did not like the fact that when you were talking, she was making eye contact with the other cabinet members to negate what you were saying. Like they were getting together because I was talking about how my diligence is going to expand, that she was just like, no. And there was a point when she literally told the board, that's not been decided yet. And I was very angry about all of it, even when we finally made decisions of how culture and connection, like, is going to evolve. Um, and then we did the really great, like, sabotage quiz. And Don and I had a great conversation. And it was very evident to me in the conversation with Don after the sabotage quiz that I really just wanted to be right. Like, that's what I cared about. Like, I want to be right. You are wrong. I am right. Say that's the case. Um, but that was actually working to my detriment because then I was creating an us versus them. Like, I felt that way from cabinet for a long time. That there are all these people, they don't understand, blah, 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 my work. And I was like, cabinet really needs to understand like diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect at this, but today I don't walk in there waiting for their validation. I know what my work is, and all I do is tell people how amazing my work is and then talk about how great they are. I may not always agree on that, but that has formatively shifted my relationship with the cabinet. It has also shifted my relationship with Andrea. I no longer bitch to her or tell her what the issues are or diagnose the cracks. I just go, this is really great. I'm happy. And the opposite has happened where she just like, oh, like my sense is she feels like one cabinet member is not bitching. So she's now starting to give me things I've always wanted that I did not ask for, like looking at disability and accessibility on campus. And I'm like, this is a DEI work. And she was just like, yeah, 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 but academic affairs, blah, blah, blah. That is to say that I recognize she's also human. And I get what you said in terms of um, her, you're trying to empathize and humanize your boss to say maybe she's having a bad day. But I mirror people's emotions a lot, and that has not worked in my favor. I mirror their energy because I'm so deeply empathetic that I'm like, oh, you're gonna shit talk with me, then I'm gonna do blah blah blah. And now I'm just like, okay. Weirdly enough, the dean of students who would like shit talk and come and talk to me and bitch, 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 but in front of cabinet never support me, no longer actually cares to talk to me because when he tries to talk to me, I'm just like, when we had a 10 years of becoming panel, he said, I was just so sad. Were you sad that there were so few people there? And I said, Wes, this is a really busy time of the semester. I choose to believe people wanted to come, but their calendars were very full. And it's sort of just like petered down. Like he no longer wants to come and like gossip with me. Neither do a couple of the other people on campus who would always be like, "Oh, did you see how they treated you?" And I'm just like, "No, I think Cabinet's doing well." And I think it formatively shifted my own internal commentary where I was feeling like I was this victim, this passive victim. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just telling you how I handled that. And when an email like this comes from Andrea, where she has sometimes just completely told me, no, we're not going in that direction, I often will be like, okay, great. I so want to say I told you so when it all falls down in the future. Like we're doing a merger and acquisition, and I highlighted to them that there will be some serious cultural clashes when you're taking a college of nursing and basically absorbing it. And they chose not to have me on those committees. They chose to have my executive director. And I still look at it and go, I told you so. And I say nothing. And I'm like, glad to hear Deacon's going so well. And I just like, when the provost is like, maybe Gauri should be part of this. And Andrew's like, well, her executive director already is. I'm like, yeah, yeah. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, you know what? This is not my shit show. Like, you chose not to have me here. I will step in when you're finally like, who the fuck can solve this? And if you never feel that way, good for you. I have so much shit to do. Like, I don't have time to look at your Ticon shit. So I think a lot of it is that I'm letting them go and do their thing. And there are days when I still like feel very rejected, but it's freeing to not want to be right. It's freeing to just say, I'm gonna do well no matter what I do. So I'm gonna take the powers and influential areas I have and really lean into them. And people do come then. People do come. At least that's what I've seen this year so far.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. I have so many um, moments of gratitude for what you just shared and how you shared it, but also just thinking self-reflection. And yeah, I think it's really helpful. I'll have to keep thinking about that in terms of the how much is your need to be right for me. Um, and I'm going to add on to that, I think, how much is my need to be appreciated, just and maybe related to gratitude being one of my core values. Yeah.
Uh, I just have to chime in here, right? And as this conversation is unfolding, right, Gauri and Trisha, as you're both talking about these different ways that emotion has been showing up, and like difficult emotions in particular, in and how you're managing that, like just seeing this immediately what came to mind, right, is leading from the inside out, right? And keep talking about what does it look like to lead with emotions, right? And and I do hear both of you talking about how you are kind of continuing to grow into that idea of not feeling like I need to get rid of emotional content, right? Which is, to Don's earlier point, part of very traditional ways of understanding quote unquote executive presence, is that it's emotionless, right? And instead moving into ways of like you are asking yourselves the questions about like how can emotion be part of how I lead, um, and and how do you want to manage emotions for yourselves, right? In particular, difficult ones. Um, this is also making me think, Don and Keith, we should do some stuff on executive presence, but not call actually not executive presence, but about leadership presence, which is I think something that the three of us, often end up talking with leaders about and really kind of expanding some of the boundaries of what have traditionally been understood to be um, what it looks like to be a leader. That could be a useful thing for us to look at here in Evolve programs. Um, I also I want to just offer into this space as a potential resource, given that one of the difficult emotions we're talking about here is anger, right? Uh, which I think about a lot, right? If you went to ACPA last year, you probably saw a keynote talk by Lamarad Owens, really, really wonderful speaker, and talks about, I mean, one of my favorite books by him is Love and Rage, right? And talks a lot about anger, right? And ways to sort of befriend anger and to think about, you know, anger sometimes really is its own standalone emotion, but very often it's actually trying to call our attention to some other emotional need, right? And it may be, right, that like that there's something that there's hurt, right? Like I feel angry because there's not gratitude. And underneath that, there may be, right, there's a hurt of not being seen, not being appreciated, right? Um, and so sometimes really asking ourselves that question, I have often found helpful, and a lot of times other folks find helpful when they are feeling anger and when they feel like, ooh, this anger is showing up in a way that I don't like the way that it's impacting my leadership right now. Just asking themselves the question, right? Like, what is it that my anger is trying to bring my attention to in this moment? Um, and then using that answer, right? Using or the multiple answers that could emerge to to guide, right? Okay, so rather than being controlled by or managed by my anger, right? Like I'm gonna manage my anger. I'm gonna manage my feelings, so that I can lead with them, Uh, so anyway, just wanted to share that terrific book and resource. And there's all kinds of other stuff. There's like freely available stuff, I'm sure, also by Lamarad about the topic of anger that could be very useful for you all to look at as well.
Pop that in chat, Brian.
Mhm. Yes, I'm so glad you brought that in. I was hoping you would.
Yeah, I'll see if
I
I
know
can.
that Gori got us started, and Trisha, you have and won beautifully here, but are there some emerging things that you wanted to raise that maybe connect with that or maybe take us in a different direction?
There's so many. There's so many
So
things.
much practice.
Oh gosh. My muscles are getting stronger every day. I know I do want to celebrate something that I had to make this content help me make meaning of, and I was like, oh hey, ah, that's it. And it was like the operations to strategy transformation.
Mm.
I am in a role that has a lot of operations things, like constantly ducks and cats and whatever else you operate, right? Um, and this morning, a colleague from admissions emailed, 9,000 people and said, please confirm that you're going to be there for our admissions day on X date. These are the tables we have reserved. And for the last 7 years, I have always been the divisional person that then coordinates all of our people, making sure, did you read the email? Are you going to be there? Do you have your staff set up? What is your table going to look like? Make sure it's engaging. And I was just busy this morning and I didn't immediately. I was like, oh, saw it. I'll come back to it later. And then I got back to my desk this afternoon and one of my team members did it. And at first I was like, what? Why is she doing that? That's what I do. And then I was like, hang on a second. You've clearly modeled what you want to have happen. Someone else is taking the lead on that. Why? Check yourself, Trisha.
Mhm.
Like, let her lead. There's no reason for me to be doing this. There's none. It's just somebody needed to do it. And so I'm just counting that as a win today um, in the transformations category.
Mhm. What's it like being at a strategy leadership level, being pulled into operational leadership while you're aspiring to visionary leadership?
Mm.
And try not to swear.
Well, I can't promise that part, but I don't even know if I have words for it. I feel like my feet and my gut and my head are in different time zones.
Mm.
You
Mm.
know, like I've got to be running on this path, but always thinking about the connections and the partnerships and the kind of purpose behind all the steps. And also kind of, I don't want to say I'm done with it. I just feel really called to do something different, to I keep saying paint the target. Um, all of the pieces around the culture, leading culture section. I was like, yes, all of that, like statements, stories, structures, rituals. That's where I feel like I want and need to be.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It's like Elastigirl.
Mhm.
And that's probably honestly what gets me in trouble sometimes. Because
Mhm.
I'm like, but I can see it. You said you wanted this and I made a path for it. Here we go. You just say thank you and we'll all move on. And
No.
yeah, no.
I What a great example, Trisha. I One of the key pieces I've noticed in my leadership that has significantly shifted, which is like, um, reminds me of the example that you shared is that the more empathetic and relaxed and grace I give to myself, the more grace, empathy, and not leeway, but grace and empathy I give to other people. I had this, I know that I have had this martyrdom like syndrome where I'm just like, I'm working so hard and everyone, like, and that has formatively shifted for me. Um, and that what that means is that even when I don't want to jump into spaces to do things, I recognize that a person is coming to me in distress, specifically people I lead and who I supervise, where back in the day I would have begrudgingly given them time off because I wanted to be empathetic. I no longer begrudgingly give it to them, and I'm happy to just say I'm happy to step in. That doesn't mean I just let them do whatever I want. There are times when they will say, my plate is too full, and then we do the prioritizing of things, and I can tell that their heart wants to go in one direction. And I'm going, yeah, well, our needs are per our annual goals in this direction. So they also know that they are always welcome to come and tell me, hey, I don't know which projects to prioritize. And I'll work with them on that, but I set the tone for which projects to then prioritize. Not I actually like this better because we want to be careful about what we're trying to achieve as a division. But a couple examples I shared about my executive assistant, my executive director, who is so high performing, and my team is pretty high performing. So they tend to pick up. If I just work like a dog, they will work like a dog. And I realize I just have to model it for them. The like disconnecting, the hey, your grandma is in the hospice and you want to visit with the family, and this is really important. Once a year thing is happening, I'll step in, tell me what to do, go. Those pieces to me back in the day, I would have been like, well, I had to do it. And I no longer feel that way. I do it far more freely because it's not about this is what I wish someone would do for me. It's about this is who I want to be as a leader. And people should be able to go visit their dying grandparents. There's nothing we're doing here that is that or chattering. That one person needs to hold that space.
I think the if we can notice what we find ourselves needing from others, love, gratitude, affirmation, and we can find ways to source it from within, gratitude from within, love from within. I think we show up less needy for it and more welcoming of it. Um, and we put ourselves in a position that if it's love that we need, we notice that we can source that within. I do a meditation that includes loving compassion and giving myself a big hug, and it's much easier to give love to other people when I don't feel I need it and I'm not getting it, because then all my focus is on why am I not getting it? Why are you not giving it to me? Where's it coming from? Where should I get? I deserve this. I've earned this. But if I can source it within, then I'm willing to give it away. And when it comes, I'm more welcoming of it rather than latching on and attaching. I don't know if I'm making sense, but maybe that connects with gratitude and some of these other things.
It makes sense to me. Um, I have a question, and I think I found the answer to it. I came to it when I was watching the video that Don really encouraged me to watch a while ago about first team
Mm.
and how like cabinet is your first team, not the team that you lead. Because I sit on the cabinet, and my question as soon as I finished that video that I marked to say was, well, I think of them as my first team, but what if they don't think of me as my first team? Like, that was my first question. And now I've sat with it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I want to say. And the answer I've come to is it doesn't matter if they think that this is how I'm going to approach it. And I don't, I know that there are no like clear right or wrong answers, but I'd love to hear what y'all's thoughts are on that.
It seems to me you're right on, but I can understand how day to day that little voice would sneak up and try to impact. Hmm.
I feel like Don was going to get in here, and I'm looking at Don, but you can't see who I'm looking at on my Zoom screen. Go, Don, go.
No, I'm actually waiting for you because
Oh,
that was based off of something that you wrote, Key.
yeah, the first
And
team.
yeah, yeah, come on in.
Okay. Well, I think the first team is this notion that the team that you report to is your first team. And most leaders think about the team that reports to them as their first team. And that's outlined in the video. I think what I'm connecting with Yori's sharing here is I want it, and we can take this to the first team or anything else. I want it to be this, but I will withhold doing that until I notice everyone else has agreed to do the exact same thing, which totally makes sense and completely gives away your power and agency. And so, how could we treat this as the first team as a way to model it for everybody else? And you've spoken to a number of things, a number of shifts that you have made that then made shifts in other people. And if we would have waited for the dean of students to stop being gossipy and complainy before we did, it wouldn't have happened. But you said, I'm going to make this shift, and then you notice this shift, and then you notice this shift, and you notice this shift in other people. And human beings have mirror neurons, and we want to replicate what we see in others. And great leaders show up the way they want other people to show up. They don't wait for the whole everybody in unison to be strategic and manage their emotions before we do that. We show up and we're strategic and we manage our emotions, and then we model that for others. So I just think whether it's the first team, whether it's leading with emotions, whether it's practicing gratitude, whether it's giving grace, how do we go there and watch others join or not join unattached to that outcome?
And the only thing, I will add to that is um, the first team is it reorients, I think, us in terms of not only our responsibilities, but where do we focus our energies? So this actually connects to what Trisha was talking about like shifting from the operational to the strategic, and then also to the visionary, right? Is understanding that the work we do, right, is um, is not only just in our area, but campus wide, right? And so we think about the first team, the choices we make in everything from the day-to-day decision making to what we react to, what we give our attention and energy to, then shifts and becomes different. Um, so much so that the waiting for others to get on board with you it almost doesn't matter as much anymore because you have clarity in what you're doing, right? You have clarity in what your orientation is towards in terms of your role and your energies. So, in nudging you to look at that, Gauri, it was also my way to remind you of your greater purpose,
Mm.
right? In all of this work, right? That you have an opportunity to impact the campus as a whole, and all these people are just they're just kind of there, right? Obviously, you have to work with them, and being, and all that stuff. But the orientation, right, of your work, of your energy, right, of what you give, your empathy to, right, is kind of like this greater thing, you know. But that's very difficult to, on a day-to-day basis, stay focused on when you have all these things that kind of pull at you, right, and wear you down, you know. I like that video, because it also invites us not to bypass, what we know to be true in terms of the power and the potential of our work, right? So, going back to the IR guy, right? Yeah, you know what? First team, I get you, and I have greater purpose here, you know? So that's just an example. Um, yeah, so everything Keith said and more.
To that team one kind of theme, I've been thinking about this is kind of after Brian, your video, and you asked us to think about a leader you admire and what they do or don't do, the symbolic leadership pieces, and um, thinking about the big leadership differences that they're palpable. Um, I've had a supervisor or a leader who was so clearly team one, like team two didn't even stand a chance. Like those culture pieces weren't there, who literally said to folks in a room, depending on who's asking me the question, no, I won't have your back. Like that's team one. But other leaders who have been able to sit maybe more comfortably and authentically in team one and team two and like call people toward the shared vision, um, and toward a greater purpose. And it really was motivating, right? Whereas the other, just like, well, why are any of us doing this? You don't even have our back, you know? And I think I think some of it probably is intuitive. Like there's just some people who have made it to a place where they can straddle, but I think it in large part also goes back to practice of how do you say, I might not be able to have your back, but in a way that team two can understand the why and the competing forces and still be able to come along.
There's, sorry, go ahead, Don. You're about to chime in.
No, go ahead.
Uh, Trisha, as you were speaking, there's a couple of things that came to mind for me. One is that I think as you reflect on people who have been skillful or effective, maybe at navigating that first team dynamic, and those who haven't, you know, it brings to mind for me the awareness that, some folks hear the concept of the first team and they might hear only team, right? Like if it's the first one's that, like I'm not really thinking about any other teams I'm a part of, right? Right. As opposed to somebody, and so those folks probably are not very effective, right? And just really, I think folks who have more skill, who are more effective in leadership, can really notice, like, I didn't say this is the only team, right? I'm just noting, right, that there are particular reasons why it's really important for me to be aligned with this team, right? And that's the basis for my ability to lead the other teams or be part of other teams. And so kind of that difference in mindset around it can be, I think, quite huge, even when it comes to the idea of like, how would I then talk with somebody on another team that I'm on that's important to me about why something might be going down in a way that isn't the way they'd prefer to see it. You know. Um, I think relatedly, it also brings to mind, there's another uh great, useful, super simple framework called fair process, which gets referenced a lot in restorative justice and restorative practices work, but it actually comes out of the business world. It comes from the Harvard Business Review. Uh, and it basically says, right, that most people can get on board with things if there are these three elements of a fair process that are present. One is engagement, right? So you talked to me and you listened to me, right, in terms of my viewpoint on this, right? And then there's explanation, right? Here's the decision and where we're going and what I'm doing and what we need to do. And this is why I'm doing this. Particularly important if maybe there's lots of different perspectives on what the right path forward is, and they're not all going to win out, right? And so being able to tell folks, right, I listened to you, right? And I heard you. And the reason why we're going in this direction instead is, right, this. And then finally, expectation clarity. That's the third E, right? Where if everybody understands, so now moving forward, this is what you can expect of me and what I need to expect from you, and right, and where everybody knows, right? It's been made very clear, right? This is what needs to happen now. Um, and when those three elements are in place, right, even if the decision is, oh, I don't really like that, right? I really wish that you had advocated for what I wanted. Um, uh, Usually people can get on board. They're like, but I know why you did what you did, right? And you did engage me, right? So you didn't just like make a decision and like not include my perspective on this at all, right? That was clearly present, right? And then you explained, right? Here's what we need to do now, right? As a sort of interesting supplement, maybe another thing to sort of bring in and connect around this concept of first team and also the dynamics when you're navigating the additional teams that you're a part of. So I'll just pause there, right? And just, see how that's landing or feeling for you, those kind of the three E's of fair process.
So many questions.
Ask away.
Okay, I'm gonna give you an example to sort of
Mhm.
how I'm using this to evaluate. And I may answer my question in the process, just FYI. So I'm verbally processing right now. Um, I'm thinking of the 10 years of becoming campaign that I'm leading right now, which essentially evolves the work from diversity, equity, and inclusion to what is now culture and connection. There was a lot of tension on campus that bubbled up. And like a true anthropologist, I made the case that this cannot be happening to people. They have to be part of the process to feel a sense of ownership. So to that effect, I did focus group discussion, and it was just a very volatile space. Like we heard everything from students going, "You're just breaking the knee," and like like bending the knee, and "I can't believe you're doing this," and blah 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 blah, which in turn also increased my own temperature and made me anxious in those spaces. Not something I'm proud of, and probably not how I would have done it. Uh, I would do it today, I would say. Of course, we explained to the whole campus why we're doing this. Part of it was, we are evolving the work, tying it closely to mission. I never said we're not doing this because of the external climate. We were very clear, like, we have to be mindful of the external climate. Things are, you know, th this only makes the work stronger because it's missionally tied and continues it forward. Um, and then there was the expectation clarity of like moving on forward. We are going to be the Office of Culture and Connection. There are going to be no exclusive spaces that can be created per the mandates of the government and all of those. So when the 10 years of becoming panel happened, I'm working with the AVP of Culture and of Communications, and she was disappointed. She's like, nobody, like, so few people showed up, and we did all of this great marketing, and the panel was amazing. And I sort of was sitting there and thinking and listening, and she was like, next time we should do this and this and this and this to increase attendance. And two things struck out to me, which was one, attendance does not mean success for event. I've done eventing for so long that quality of the experience matters a lot more to me than the quantity of people that are there. So I sort of explicitly pointed it out. And I said, you know what? My worry and concern was that people would show up there angry. Because I said, I firsthand saw the anger. I ran these focus group discussions. I did the thematic analysis on this, and there was anger. And I said, what I can tell you is that this is a successful campaign because if students were mad, they would have showed up in giant numbers. I can guarantee you that. The fact that they didn't show up, however, to me was very clearly a gap between anger and being okay with where we are. But there's a gap because I feel like they have a sense of grief. And
Hmm.
that just because they're not angry doesn't mean that they're ready to celebrate. And we were really
Hmm.
celebrating this. Like it was a celebration panel with a reflection station because we were very aware that people would have grief. And for her, it was just it didn't land and it failed in her mind. And I'm like, I think we did pretty good. But that is all to say, I'm still also sad. And I'm like, how do I get them from grief to celebration? And will they ever reach there? And is there a way to get there? So I know that I understand it, but I also wish that there would be a lot more celebration. And I'm hopeful that once we actually show the way that we're going to do the work, that people will engage.
Hmm.
So, yeah, this kind of brought me to the question of we did follow the process, and I think we did a good job. But how do I bridge the gap between grief
Hmm.
and celebration?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, which is a great question, right? And so, sometimes, there's these really simple, like, oh, these three E's, and it's great, like, we just do this, it's all going to be hunky-dory, right? And often that's not true, or it's not instantly true, right? Like, you might do all the things. And again, what I said or what this framework kind of found, right, is that people can get on board with the decision. That doesn't mean they love the decision, right? But they're like, but we're on board with this, right? So, I think it's very interesting, right? Your interpretation different than your colleagues of the fact that there aren't a bunch of students here protesting this, right, is a signal to you that they probably get why this has happened, right? And like we already had the process of talking with them about responding to those questions of are you just bending the knee, right?
Mhm.
To be able to say no, right? That's not the objective, right? So there are people out there who know that, right? But you're also very rightly tuning into the fact that that again, that doesn't mean that folks still don't wish things were different, right? And there may need to be a process, right, of moving through grief in order to get to a place of being able to celebrate. Um, and so, I mean, I think that awareness that you're bringing is very powerful. And I wonder, right, from your perspective, where you sit right now, what do you think the campus community is needing in order to be able to be supported in going through a grief process that allows them to get to a place of greater resolution and perhaps even appreciation for where you are now?
I I believe that a listening session for people to say how
Yeah.
they feel would be empowering because they would hear each other.
Hmm.
However, that has been shut down so severely every
Hmm.
single time I brought up that I'm not going to even bring it up because there's some campus trauma to it. There was a Title IX case at one point that went wrong, and they did a listening session. This was even before the current dean of students showed up. That was the old dean of students.
Mhm.
It got so bad, it was almost like a riot on the
Yeah.
campus. And the students, essentially, the old dean of students retired because of it. They said, we won't come for commencement if she sits on the stage because they thought that she had mishandled the case so badly. So every time I bring it up, there are all of these people and it activates them, and they're just like, no listening session. It's like the
Mhm.
boogeyman. So there
Sounds
has to
like
be some,
leadership
The
traumas.
leadership trauma. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, they're carrying on the leadership trauma.
So we find spaces to make this, and I think I that we're creating dialoguing spaces, and I've realized that it has to happen from my team. It
Yeah.
can't just be coming from me. I can pull out the strategic vision, but I have finally, after 2 years, learned that me not being on the ground actually is better. That
Mhm.
is so hard for me. I love the operational piece. I'm just like, let me get
Yeah.
my hands dirty. Let me, like, I can do. And the number of students and people that I have actually said, actually, I can only be available in this way. And they're like, well, sorry, we can't do it. And I'm like, fine, move on. I'm just like, wow,
Mhm.
why wasn't I doing this before? Like, literally showing up everywhere and just exhausting my energy. I want to be there for those students, but I also have realized that not having easy access to me actually is better. And that's so hard for me because that's the kind of leader I like started as like, I want to become this kind of leader too. Okay,
Mhm.
this is where we are now. And I actually think this works better.
Yeah. Yeah. Gauri, I just want to, note as you're, you mentioned a little bit earlier, you talked about uh, this sense of, right, like you, the a strategy, right, of a listening session to you would feel like a really great way of addressing this concern, right? Would be a way to help people move through a grief process. And your experience is, and there's not leadership buy-in for that,
Mhm.
right? Because of this trauma that folks have experienced. They are not open. It's too far outside of their comfort zone right now. Um, you know, uh, uh, to be able to go that route. Um, and even acknowledging that, right? There, I wonder, right, as you then think about, okay, what is it about a listening session that I think would have been so helpful here? And what are the other strategies you might utilize to get at those same outcomes? Um, because oftentimes we find particular strategies taken off the board for us, right? And sometimes it can be then become very easy to focus on the constraint, right? That option isn't available to me. Well, darn it, I think it would be really good, right?
Mhm.
Another way of thinking about it is, okay, so maybe perhaps this is an opportunity to think, okay, what are the other tools I might utilize? Maybe some tools they might still be outside of folks' comfort zone, but not so far outside, right, that they immediately shut it down, right? Because this is the sort of thing that it's probably going to make people a little uncomfortable. Um, but what's that like? Okay, like the toes are over the line, right, of the comfort zone, but not all the way like in the deep end where you are afraid you're going to drown, right? Um, so it could be just kind of a good places to keep thinking and considering about like what are some other ways you could get at those same important outcomes, which, as you've articulated them, do sound like really critical and important, right? For getting to the goal that you have, which is for the campus to be at a place where they could really celebrate where you are now.
That's so great. I'm gonna think about that more and probably talk to Dawn about it.
Mm.
I know we have to wrap up, but I'll just throw this last thought in terms of the three E's. I actually wonder about the last E in terms of expectation clarity in your situation, Dori, in terms of there seems to be a either mismatch or disconnect between what the participants um, understand in terms of what what the outcomes are of hearing versus what, leadership have in terms of expectation clarity. And so I think that the fair process gives us an opportunity to think about the three E's for different stakeholders and how those might be very interconnected, but slightly different as well. So I'll just add that. And then I know we got to wrap up. Oh, I'm
Go ahead,
wrapping. Oh,
Don.
I'm wrapping up.
You're
That's
wrapping
me.
us up.
Sorry. Sorry. I was like, I'm going to make space for the wrap up. Um, okay. Um, like as always, this time has been great conversation. But we are coming to the end of another engaging session. I wanted to make sure that everybody understands the next part of Evolve to see if there's any questions, because we are heading into what we refer to as your leadership in action now. And so this is where we're going to give you some opportunity to think about some current context, some things that are going on, and to uh, we move from the knowing, the conceptual piece, to the doing. Now, I'll take that from Keith. From the unconscious, maybe knowing piece, the competence we demonstrate into the being. So same thing as always, make sure you're doing the best you can to stay on the content, and then also your one-on-one coaching sessions. I know that for many of us, we're heading into a very, very busy time of the semester. Are there any final questions before we adjourn? You good? Keith, Brian?
No, great.
Nope,
Thank you
that's
all.
fine.
This has been fantastic. I got a whole page of notes.
All right, folks. Take care and have a wonderful week.
Thanks, you
Thank you,
too.
everyone.
Bye all.
Bye-bye.
Enjoy the rest of your birthday week, Trisha.
Thank you so much.
Indeed.
You too.
Thank